Mr. Patrick,
Hey, hey,
how you doing,
how
my
are you?
brother?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great. I'm definitely jealous of you. I know that the sun that's hitting you right now is South California,
It's
LA. You
yes,
have the
Southern
warm.
California. It's actually really bright, but I guess it is what it is.
It's perfect, man. So let me just start off saying, how's everything going with you? How's life in LA and so on and so forth?
I think we're doing better than you guys are right now.
It's crazy,
Unreal.
bro. It's
Yeah, my
crazy.
family, friends, everybody's in Montreal right now, so it's hard to watch. It's hard to see people, especially my friends in the gym business that are getting played around like I've never seen anything like it. As we're
Honestly,
here, everybody's getting vaccinated now. I just scheduled my vaccine for next week. Numbers are dropping, things are opening. There's a sense of like things coming back to some sort of normal, is where everyone I know in Montreal is going in the opposite direction. So it's tough, man, for sure.
yeah, yeah. And you know what? First of all, let me just say hi to all the people that are logging on, saying hi. They're like, hi, my brother. So what's up, everybody that's there? And Patrick, you touched on a couple of things. Like, first of all, obviously the states that you guys are like vaccinating millions and millions of people at the same time, not at the same time, but per day, so much more
Yeah,
faster than us. And I think just because most of the drugs are coming from American companies, so I think the accessibility is there. But that being said, on a Canadian perspective, seeing you guys go through those thresholds and opening up, it still keeps me very positive. Like, okay, we're gonna get it. We're just maybe gonna be a couple of months later. Or I don't know what the time
yeah.
frame is, but we're going towards that direction. So I still see it positive on that line. And talk to me about like what's your perception with the people in the gyms? Because one of my business partners for the book that I'm co-authoring, he's the owner of the CrossFit gym that I work out, and I mean they're going through the ringer. I really feel bad for
Yeah.
those people because a lot of the industries are like, oh yeah, cool, you guys do your thing, and then a specific industry or a couple of them, and that's restaurants, that's this, that's that, are like completely going through a ringer within this. What's your perception on that?
My perception is that if you're going to, so in California, what we saw was people pivoted. The thing is, here, you can be outdoors 12 months a year, right? So gyms immediately started opening up parking lot workouts. They started going into parks. They started opening on rooftops. It was amazing to see the creativity that people used to keep their businesses going. I think what I've seen in Montreal and a lot of the friends that I have that are gym owners is they were told that as long as you do these things, we will allow you to reopen. So they spent thousands of dollars to do those things, and then they're being shut down anyway.
Yeah,
So not only do they not have an income coming in, but they've been putting money out to adapt and make things safe and make things as safe as possible. But then I think they're being played. Honestly, I feel like there's a lack of responsibility. I don't think people recognize that this is the livelihood for a lot of people, right? I think there was something, oh, it was neat to see that people were allowed to go back to their gyms for 2 weeks. It's like, man, don't you get it? Like that's not fun for anyone. It's not good for the members. It's not good for the gym owners. So, but I do know a lot of friends of mine who pivoted, who went digital, who actually are doing really well online. But that's more the trainers and less the gym owners, right? The ones
yeah,
that have real estate, those are the ones that are going to have a really hard time because
right.
someone's got to pay the rent.
I,
Um,
I
but
love
yeah,
the way you
I
kind of
don't know.
brought that up. I
Yeah,
really do. Yeah, it really is that's what it is over there. And let me just jump in because we kind of just went in and got excited here. I didn't even present
yeah,
Patrick. Patrick, honestly, the thing I love about social media is this right here. Let me explain why. I met Patrick through Clubhouse. I was blessed enough
yes,
for him to kind of roll into the Wednesday 6:30 p.m. EST Clubhouse that I run, the Peak Performance Club. And the second we started talking through Clubhouse, I'm like, yo, this man knows what's up. And you were definitely very eloquent, and I'm not blowing steam up your ass. Like you're definitely an
thank
eloquent
you.
speaker, and I hope these people are going to see it now with the questions we're going to go into. But yeah, I just wanted to connect with you, and this is what I love about social media. You meet people online, but once you get off the online and actually connect with somebody and really go in depth in conversations, it's just beautiful. So the
Yeah,
first thing
absolutely.
is, Patrick, tell me about like what you're doing right now because you did mention you're in mixed martial arts. Your background is in that, but right now you have a class that you're doing in that's very much on like the self-defense and the mindfulness. Talk to me about that correlation because I find it extremely interesting.
Right. So my background is as a Muay Thai trainer, MMA coach in Montreal. I did that for many, many, many years. And then I also worked as a personal trainer because I felt like I wanted to get a better understanding of the fitness aspect of training. Also, fighters don't have much money to pay you, so you have to find clients. And, having that personal training background definitely helped with that as well. The last thing, too, is that I got really into meditation through martial arts. I was super curious about the mind, but then through Muay Thai, you're introduced to a lot of Buddhist practices and Buddhist traditions. And so I got turned on to meditation, and that became a huge part of my life. And then I got really lucky that one day I was out for a run in Mount Royal, and ran to the top of the mountain, pushing it, hill sprints, killing it. And when I got to the top of the mountain, I decided I was going to meditate on top of the mountain, still recovering from this super intense run. And that's when I had my first, what I call like my spiritual awakening, because that moment was so powerful that it forced me to kind of shift my perspective on a lot of things. And since that moment, I've been, diving into that practice of combining high intensity movement with meditation or breath training, as I come to call it now, to help myself and now other people kind of unlock that state, that flow state, that peak performance state. And like you did mention, recently what I've done is I've shifted a lot of my focus to a program that I called Live Ready. And Live Ready is all about helping people feel ready for whatever could happen to them in life. So yes, self-defense is a part of it, but I think there's a lot more going on in the world right now than just the potential of someone attacking you, right? Because let's be honest, for most people, that's not really ever going to happen. But having that knowledge to deal with stress and fear, that's a real problem for a lot of people, especially during COVID, where, especially in the States right now, I woke up one morning and there was a mass shooting in a grocery store. The next day I was in a grocery store thinking, oh my God, at any moment that could happen, right? That's a possibility now. And I think that we need to be ready, not that that's likely to happen, but I want to know that I'm ready if something like that happens, that I'm at least able to take control of my emotions, take control of the fear, and then hopefully be of service in some way. So that's what this program is all about. It's about teaching people to be ready through functional fitness, through martial arts and defense training, and through breath training.
Patrick, I mean, you mentioned so many things that we could go on so many different rants on, and I'm going to try to just correlate a couple of things over here. First and foremost, you said that you had your first awakening when you were doing some sprints in Mount Royal, which is a mountain over here in Montreal, and then you did meditation and you had that. I want to talk about that awakening. You mentioned as well the aspect of being confident, not necessarily for the defense side of things, but the fact that you know that you could defend yourself with the mixed martial arts or any type of defense gives you confidence. And I want to talk about that as well, as I just listened to the Joe Rogan podcast with George St. Pierre, which he talks about that. I want to unpack that. But let's start off with the aspect of you meditating and having that awakening, like you mentioned. What was that exactly? How can you explain it? Because I've had some things in my life that I think was similar to that, and I'll kind of give you my perspective. But what was that experience like to you when you had that awakening after that? What I understand, the first ever time you really meditated in a significant way.
Yeah, so meditation was something that leading up to that moment, I had been practicing, I want to say for about 6 months. I'd read some books on Buddhism. I was practicing in my room, door closed, like the traditional way of doing it, I guess, sitting on the floor in a private, quiet space. And I'd had great, experiences, but never that aha moment. If you read Buddhist texts, they talk about Satori, or this moment of enlightenment that happens during a meditation practice. And I had yet to have that, or at least nothing that I was aware of, right? I mean, it felt good. I felt like I was reducing stress and dealing with some things in that way, but I never had that moment that they were promising me in this book, right? And so the way that I saw it was at the end of that run, I was in a heightened state. So what I've come to realize is if you look at flow states, and I think this awakening really was triggering a flow state. When you look at flow states, a flow state is triggered by a combination of two things. It's triggered, first of all, by challenge and then release. Okay, so first you need that challenge. You need that reason for flow. You need that reason for your body to go into this heightened state. And then you need to let go, right? Because if you hold on to all of that energy and all that stress, you never let go mentally, and you stay in thought. You stay in this state of like awareness. So what I realized is by going for that run, I was triggering all of this very powerful positive neurochemistry. And then when I sat to breathe, the first part was much more difficult than usual because my lungs are on fire. I'm recovering from this run, and it's actually very difficult to breathe. But then I just stayed focused and I kept breathing and I kept breathing. And then there was a I call it a click, where suddenly I could feel my body start to tingle, and then I couldn't feel my body anymore. I remember being hyper aware, but not thinking. I know that sounds kind of strange, but it was more like I could feel the wind on my skin. I could hear the birds in the trees. I could even hear people behind me, but there was no thought. I wasn't thinking about, oh, I wonder what that is or what will I do later. It was really a state of thoughtlessness. And I don't know how long I sat there from, experiences since. I'm sure that it was probably about 10 minutes, 15 minutes that I was in that state, maybe even less because it goes by very quickly. It's like time dilation, basically. Yeah, and that's what it was. And then it was when I came back to myself, if you would, and I opened my eyes and I looked around and I realized like, oh, it happened. Because suddenly everything was more vivid, the colors were brighter. To be honest, it was almost like a psychedelic experience, to be honest. It was really that powerful. But more importantly, it was what it did to my mind. My perspective shifted. I suddenly felt connected to something greater than myself. I mean, I've never been a spiritual person. I've never been a religious person. But in that moment, I had no choice but to believe that there had to be something greater at work. What that is, that's up for an entire different conversation. But it was there. That belief was there. And the other thing that I noticed was that I was performing at a whole different level. I started making my way back down the mountain, and I almost felt like I felt lighter, I felt faster, I felt stronger. I got home, and I was in school at the time, and I was writing, and my writing was better. I was reading, and reading was easier. So that's when I connected that, okay, yes, it was a spiritual moment, but it was also a peak performance moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what got me really excited, because as a trainer, as a coach, and especially I was working with fighters at the time, I was like, hey, I need to tell my fighters about this. Because if I can get them into that peak performance state, imagine what they could be capable of. So yeah, that was the first moment that led to many moments afterwards and a lot of research and work since.
So that is amazing. Let me just highlight a couple of things. First and foremost, that aha moment, that let's not even call it enlightenment because I think that's another level, but that moment of like full awareness, it takes time to get there. So don't expect anybody that's listening to this and like,
No,
hey,
no,
I
no,
want to
no.
get
Yeah.
into a meditation. It takes time. And not only it takes time, even like I've been meditating for years now, and sometimes I'm in it, sometimes I'm not. Most of
Yeah.
the times I'm not, to be quite honest. I could count it on one hand a number of times that I've had an out-of-body experience or really in that state of high level of flow. You did mention flow, which essentially is a research that was popularized by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which I highly suggest. And essentially, that's what you're kind of saying. And when you are in a meditative state, it has to be hard enough, but still be able to do it, to challenge yourself to get in there. And once you're in that state of flow, everything seems a bit easier. Just like when professional athletes say, I was in the zone, like I couldn't miss a
Yeah.
shot, everything was there. That's why afterwards your run felt better. That's why the reading was better. That's why the writing was more in flow. And then you correlate it to, hey, this is what I gotta tell my athletes, which is exactly like accurate. Like for me, my spiritual coach, what I call her name is Tina Poitras, and she's a two-time Canadian Olympian. And she told me in the beginning of her career as an Olympian, she was a speed walker. And she's like, hey, in the beginning, when I wanted to get that extra minute, I used to force super hard. And then when she got into meditation, she's like, I just let myself meditate while I was walking, and I was able to get to that result a lot easier and without negative repercussions to my body. So it definitely is interesting on that end. And Patrick, tell me about the self-defense aspect with the confidence that you mentioned, and we're going to dabble in that idea of like, hey, going in a grocery store and God forbid anything could happen like you mentioned. Talk to me about that self-defense aspect, and is that idea open to everybody essentially?
Yeah, 100%. And so my definition of self-defense. So I'll tell you exactly where this whole idea came from. So I lived in Costa Rica for a year in 2013, 14. And while we were there, my wife was there actually to do a master's degree at the University for Peace. The University for Peace is this incredible school, and it's mandated by the United Nations. And it's basically a whole bunch of different graduate studies programs focused on peace studies. And so her specific program was media, conflict, and peace studies. So it was the relationship between the media and the conflict that's going on in the world. And at the end of this program, what they did is they take the students, they bring them out into the jungle for a week, and they go through a conflict zone field training course, which is basically a conflict zone simulation. So they throw them into all kinds of really, really intense situations. They had people come in with like machine guns and pull them out of their cabin in the middle of the night, and just some really intense stuff. And secretly, the professor had reached out to me a few weeks before and asked, would you be willing to teach a self-defense workshop as part of this course? I was like, absolutely. But then I realized that I never taught what I knew for self-defense. I trained fighters. I taught Muay Thai. It was more fitness. It was more sport. It was more competition. And I knew that a lot of this stuff could be used for self-defense, but I'd never been asked to teach it as a self-defense course. The other thing I started thinking was like, I have 2 hours with these people. I don't know how much martial arts I can teach them in 2 hours that they're going to walk away feeling confident that, hey, if shit goes down, I got this. You know what I mean? So I thought, and then the other thing too is that whole year that I spent basically in the jungle, I had done a lot of research on flow. I'd done a lot of research on using movement and breath training to deal with stress, to deal with fear, to better understand how I can take control of my emotions. And I felt like, hey, you know what? That is way more important to someone going into a conflict zone or any type of stressful situation than learning a few martial arts moves, right? So I put together this workshop that actually combined all those things. So I recreated that formula. The first thing I did is I made them run around this park that we were in. Then I had them breathe. So I taught them how to breathe to recover from that run. Then some of them actually got into a little bit of a flow state, a little bit of a heightened state, mostly those that had some meditation experience. Mm-hmm. Then we dove into the importance of fitness. I was like, hey, for those of you that just ran around the park twice and are completely dead right now, that's not good. You need to be more fit, because what happens if something goes down? What happens if you need to evacuate? What happens if you need to do something physical that's going to challenge you and you're not up to it? You should not be in a stressful situation in that case, right? Then we talked about martial arts. Then I showed them some basic techniques that are highly effective and easy to learn, but that was just a small piece of it. So for me, self-defense isn't really just learning all the different aspects of martial arts. It's actually, first of all, learning how to deal with your own emotions, how to deal with the fear and stress of the situation. And that comes a lot from the experience I had with fighters. I've seen extremely talented fighters step into the ring and crumble under the pressure because they couldn't handle the moment. And I've seen fighters with a little less talent, but do extremely well because they thrived on the pressure. They thrived on the moment, right? And so I realized, like, hey, that outcome of that negative thing that's about to happen is going to be more determined by my ability to take control of my emotions and fear and stress than any type of skill that I might have. So that's my relationship to self-defense. And that's what I preach, because I think it's more important that we understand that. The other thing too I'll say about martial arts training is that it empowers you, right? Learning these techniques, learning how to defend yourself, even if you never use it. I've never used it. I've never had to actually defend myself. I mean, I've fought and sparred for countless hours, but I've never actually been in it. And I've diffused some situations that could have gone there because I was so confident in my abilities that there was no stress. It was like, hey, I got this. I can handle this situation. So I'd say, like, you know, even if you feel like you're in a safe place and you'll never actually have to defend yourself, still do the training, because that training builds so much physical and mental confidence that it's just so worth it.
I mean, that was amazing on the aspect of the correlation between our breath and our inner work and the control of emotions, because the reality is when emotion is super high, logic is low. And when logic is high, emotion is low, right?
Very
and
well
that's
said,
what you're saying. Like, imagine you're in a situation that something happens, God forbid, shit hits the fan. Your emotions are going to be through the roof. So if you're trained how to deal with your emotions, then you're able to see things logically. You just gave an example of two different fighters, which legit, they train their whole life to be fighters and they have the skills, but then once they're not training their emotions, they get into the ring or the octagon or whatever sense we're talking about here, they freeze up. It's because they haven't dealt with the emotions. So I love the fact that you kind of worked with, let's call it like starting people in the park that you gave the example. You did a little ramp up before actually going into, hey, here's some self-defense. And man, Patrick, I wanted to kind of talk to you about this. Like I said, I just listened to the Joe Rogan podcast with GSP, and GSP, which is George St. Pierre, which he was like one of the greatest fighters in UFC. Obviously, you know this, but I'm telling the people here.
Yeah, of course.
And he was saying, he's like, yeah, I still train. This is George St. Pierre that's saying to Joe Rogan. And he's like, I train because I love the confidence that it gives me. He's like, when I don't train, I don't feel confident. And it was so mind-blowing to me because this man is a world champion, movie star, so on and so forth. And he's like, hey, the reason why I started training is because I was getting bullied and I wanted to increase in confidence. And he's like, I never used what I learned on the bullies. It's the fact that I got more confident and they let me be because I was more confident. He's like, if I don't train now, I don't feel confident. So it's that ideology of knowing, just like you said, that you know how to diffuse a situation because you know that you have the ability in your back pocket if you need to, and you don't bring it up, but you have that ability, gives you that confidence. So essentially, self-defense for you is having that confidence. Now, you brought it up, and I'm really intrigued because you're somebody that lived in Montreal and now lives in the States. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you went to New York as well. Now you're in LA, and you did mention some situations with, going in a grocery store and God forbid something happens or whatever the case is. How's your ideology with that, coming from a Canadian understanding to now living in the States and essentially having more like gun situations, unfortunate deaths because of that in the States? Do you feel like you're a bit more like, is it a different mindset? Because I never think of that. I never have that ideology. I'm going to a grocery store, there might be that risk. There's a risk like anywhere, but it's not our realities such as in the States. And yeah, talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's scary. It's scary. Absolutely. In fact, I'm someone who just recently, so there was that one in Boulder, Colorado, which was the grocery store, but more recently in Orange, California, which is, 45 minutes away from where I live, it was a minor thing. Well, minor. I mean, only 2 people died, right? And that's what, at this point, that's where we're at. It's like, oh, how many people? Like, even the other day, when the Boulder, Colorado thing happened, my son was like, I was like, hey, did you hear about the shooting? He's like, oh, another one? And it was just so like, we're so desensitized to it at this point, and I think that's the big part of the problem. Is I think that it's become so common, whether it's the racial violence that's been going on, whether it's the shootings that have been going on here, we've become so desensitized to it that we're not having the normal reaction that we should be having. We should be afraid, but I think people aren't as afraid as they should be, right? Because we're just so used to it until it happens to someone until it happens really close by. I have that fear. Right? I do, and I feel it, but instead of allowing it to, instead of desensitizing myself to it and trying to turn it off, I'm using it as fuel, right? I'm using it, and not in the way that I'm training to take down an armed person. Like, that's not the way I see it. It's more, I want to know that if something were to happen, and that could be anything across the board, I want to feel in control. I want to feel like I can be part of the solution. I'll give you a really good example that happened in Montreal, by the way. So not here in the States, in Montreal. I was in Montreal a couple of years ago waiting for my visa while I was moving to New York, in the process of moving to New York. I was on the subway, and some crazy lunatic dude walks into the subway, starts getting really violent, starts smashing his head against the window, screaming at the top of his lungs. He's obviously, pretty deranged. And immediately there's this incredible fear energy that just spreads throughout the whole metro car, right? And there's women and there's children and there's all kinds of people there, older people, and everyone kind of starts shifting away from this crazy guy. And he's staring people down, but we're locked in this subway car, right? We're in between stations. There's nowhere to go. And I get that fear response. But rather than like back away from everyone else, I just sat there and I thought, I'm looking around. I'm like, I know how to defend myself. I felt like it was my responsibility to keep an eye on things. I was like, until this is settled, I'm not going to be the one to take this guy down unless, because right now he's just hurting himself. But if he goes after anyone or whatever, immediately I went into this kind of analytical mode, like, okay, how big is he? What technique would I use? What's the situation? Blah, 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 blah. Am I trained for this? Can I even do this safely? I felt like I could. He wasn't that big. I felt like, you know what? I have enough knowledge that I could actually handle this guy if I need to. So I sat there, the doors open, people got off. This guy was still there. There were still people. I skipped my stop. I stayed on. The next stop, Metro Police were waiting. They grabbed him. They took him away. So that was the kind of situation that I felt like, I'm not going to jump this guy. I'm not going to get involved unless I absolutely have to. But I felt like, you know what? I actually have a feeling of confidence that I can be a part of the solution here. And that's what I want people to be able to do. That's what I want to teach. It's not that you're going to go into some grocery store and take down some guy with an assault rifle, but it's also that you won't be the person that's screaming at the top of their lungs with zero logic. I love what you said before about logic. It's like, okay, this is happening right now. Okay, let's take a breath, let's take control, and let's be able to figure out the best solution for whatever situation is going on. And that comes with training. You have to put yourself through it, through training, to take control of your emotions, to use breath in that way, to be able to know that, hey, whatever happens, that's why I say live ready, because it's about being ready for anything. And that can be at work, right? If your boss comes in and he's yelling at you, if you're able to stay calm, that's going to go better than if you're also freaking out and you start yelling back. And
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't matter what situation you're in. When you learn to live ready, you're basically ready for anything, which is what it's all about.
I love that. I love that. And honestly, that's the reason why I started meditating, because I realized that, hey, instead of reacting to a situation, I'm responding to it. You know, you're like, hey, you take time. And that's that aspect of controlling your emotions that you mentioned. So even in
100%.
the craziest scenarios, you were able to sit down and do an analytical thing that, okay, wait a minute, if this dude does this, I'll do this. If he does that, I'll do that. Okay, let me stay in this position to protect this person. And that only happens if you're in control of your emotions. And you're able to do that because, first of all, you have an expertise once again within that. But even if you don't have an expertise, imagine, I would say me in that exact scenario. I've never thrown a punch, and I hope God I'll never throw a real punch, okay? But I know how to to position my body and whatever the case is.
Yeah.
If I'm able to control my emotions, I'm able to have that same analytical way, probably not as eloquent as you, but same way to be like, all right, if he does this, maybe I could do this, or whatever the case is. And that comes with controlling your emotions. And that was one extreme example, but you said the same thing. Imagine you're having a discussion with your significant other. Imagine you're in the car, everybody's in the car, and then, oh, there's a car that swerves in your lane. You're like, oh my God, what do I need? That's responding. And the only way you control that is through your emotions. So I love what you're teaching here. And let me just, because I want to be respectful for your time here. Where can people connect with you to learn this, to go into your class? Because what you're teaching, I think, is extremely valuable. Not only is valuable, it's necessary for the time that we're living in right now with, like you said, so many different racial situations, with COVID going on, with gun laws, or whatever the case is. I feel like this is something that people should learn. And it's not only valid for those aspects like we just mentioned, it's valid for your everyday life. So where can people connect with you and dabble into this thing that you're teaching?
Empowerflow. So EMPWRFLO. That's everything.com for the website, for Instagram, for Facebook. I'm even on TikTok now, which is a bit of a different animal, but I'm having some fun with that. It's all over the place. I'm trying to do what I can. I do one-on-one coaching. I also have some live classes online that people can take. So everything's on my website, and that's probably the best place to check it out.
Awesome. Patrick, I'll definitely link up everything, as you know. And one last thing, what can I do to support you more?
Just keep doing what you're doing, man. Hopefully we'll be back on Clubhouse soon.
Yeah.
I think that's such a cool platform. I'm even hopefully going to start my own Live Ready channel on there, because I think this is something people need to talk about. I think we need to have more and more conversations about this. I'm also getting involved with teens and mental health. And I'm bringing a big part of this program into that direction with an organization that I work with called Physiology First. They're doing some amazing work of breathing, movement, and breath solutions into schools to give teens the tools that we just talked about. Because I think we're underestimating how hard COVID has been on our kids. And, you know, you have kids that are in schools with masks and dividers and not being able to interact with each other. I think we're underestimating how much of an effect that's having on our kids. And I want to be part of the solution as far as that's concerned. So awesome. A lot of really cool stuff going on. Yeah.
Awesome. I love all that. And I'm going to follow and tag all those stuff. And yeah, let me know when that Clubhouse thing is on. And like we said, like next Wednesday, we're on live on my Clubhouse. So I'm sure you'll be there as well.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
One thing with all of this, like I just want to say thank you to all the people that listened to this during the live. If you're listening to repeat, hope there's some value within this. And if you're watching it on a repeat on my YouTube channel, comment down below as well. So if you guys want anything to be answered by Patrick or me, we're here for you guys. So that being said, Patrick, it was a true honor. Thank you, my brother. We'll definitely stay connected, and continue phenomenal work, man.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Peace.
All right. Thank you, my brother. Have a good one.
Have a good one.